we're going to talk about just about every aspect of our experience with Star Wars. And so we could be here for 5 hours if we kept on with the news, but we're going to start with our experience with Star Wars from early childhood, which is basically the original trilogy. Now, I was born in 78, and you were
79.
Born in 79. Star Wars A New Hope was 77, wasn't it?
That's right.
So our experience with the original trilogy was not in the theater. We were too young for that. So I as a child played with all the toys.
Right.
And when I really got to watching the movies, it was on TV or video cassette. Some of you young kids may not even know what that is, but VHS. That's right. As a matter of fact, here is my special edition version of the original trilogy. These are called VHS tapes, kids. This is video cassette. How about that? Oh, I didn't get it again.
Be kind, rewind.
Yes, rewind. Some of you may not even know what it means to rewind a tape. But that was most of my experience with the original trilogy was VHS or TV. Right. And obviously the awesome toys.
They were good. This kind of, I'm in the same boat. Star Wars has always been around. I kind of remember Return of the Jedi as a newer thing, but as far as the other goes, and I don't remember if I went and saw the Return of the Jedi in theaters. I would have been 79 if it came out in 83. I'd have been 4-ish on December of I would have been about 4.
So probably not to that point yet.
Most likely not, but I remember seeing it even now when I watch it, it's still, some parts of it still seem new.
The thing that stands out to me about the original trilogy is the character arcs, the progression of even if you're just focusing on Luke Skywalker, his progression from farm boy to what you see in Return of the Jedi, and the difference in those. He's basically a different character in Return of the Jedi,
right?
But he's progressed to that point, and to me, I've seen that in other stories, whether it's books or other movie series or a TV series. You see that type of character arc that stands out to me.
Absolutely.
And it's crazy to me how even the original trilogy still today, it's still those 3 movies it's like everything about them is just right. Even the special effects, even though it's old and outdated technology, it was good enough to still look good today when you watch them.
Right.
I can't imagine what that must have been like seeing it for the first time in 77. Like not having seen anything like that in the theater. I can't imagine how awesome that would have been.
That's and something else, because it was so long between the original trilogy and then the prequel trilogy. We went through school, most of our entire school lives. We graduated in 97, and the thing that I remember is that Star Wars was something that was popular, but it was still a geek thing, and we had to be careful about how much we admitted to enjoying Star Wars.
Yeah.
And it, too, we've talked before about how in games and in comics and in television shows and movies, it's all a study of character.
Right.
And you have these characters that we grew up with when we're talking about Luke and Leia and Han and Chewie, and the droids as well. But probably from those, we watched, especially Han Solo. When we consider the characters, probably, I would say, well, maybe the most changed from the beginning to the end. Because, by the way, Han shot first. It's empty.
Not only did Han shoot first, when you watch the original, not the special edition, not any of the re-edits, the original footage, Han was the only one to shoot.
Right.
So he not only did he shoot first, Rito didn't even shoot.
Right.
So
yeah. But I mean, at the end, he's willing to sacrifice himself, put himself in a dangerous position so that his friends can make it out. And at the beginning, he's selfish.
Well, and that's, the only one that really doesn't have much of an arc are the older characters, because they've already gone through that. Mm-hmm. So then you have even Princess Leia from A New Hope to Return of the Jedi. She's made a complete turnaround in her character or her personality because of some things that she's seen over the course of these, few movies.
I don't know. I would almost say that of all of the characters, she may be the most static.
Well, she is. It's odd because in A New Hope, she is literally playing the damsel in distress role, but she doesn't act like a damsel in distress.
Right.
And then,
I mean, the entire time
you see her. I guess the big thing with her arc is the things that she learns. Because you go from making out with your brother to finding out he's your brother. That's a pretty big, pretty big step.
I'm glad there's a lot of things there that we missed.
But it's not just their characteristics, but there's a lot that changes about their looks too. Luke especially. Luke's the stuff he wears, his hairdo, and all that. You can tell in Return of the Jedi, he's getting closer to being the Jedi Master, and just the way he walks, the way he presents himself when he goes to Jabba's palace, you can tell he's in complete control of everything.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And a lot of that too, I think, comes from his master, the tutelage of Yoda and Yoda's Twilight. I mean, that's. To me, he couldn't have had a better mentor. I mean, he had Obi-Wan first of all, and Obi-Wan taught him some things. He started to awaken that force within Luke, but then he has Yoda to help him along. I think considering those two, and
something else that pushes Luke's character forward is first he deals with the death of Obi-Wan, and then the death of Yoda.
Right.
And that when Yoda dies, that's almost when he's like, okay, I am the master now. I'm the one left.
Well, he was the last Jedi.
Then, of course, as Yoda dies, he tells him there's another, and then of course you find out later that okay, that's Leia. Unfortunately, it's after they kiss.
Right.
But that's another thing, that's like the revelation about Vader being his father. Up to that point, you felt like, just like he would have felt, we were always told Vader killed his father.
Right.
And so that was the known fact about what happened there is, well, Darth Vader killed Anakin Skywalker. And so he's carrying that with him. And then the bombshell that, no, I'm your father. But then he has to say, of course, search your feelings. You know it to be true.
Right.
And so that's one of the things that I'm thinking about when it comes to The Last Jedi. Is and I was talking about this last night with somebody else. We were talking about Rey's parents, and he said, "What do you think about that?" And I said, "I'm hoping that he was just telling her that."
Well,
and we got to talking about what Luke was told about Darth Vader and Anakin is, in other words, saying, well, Darth Vader killed your dad. And then he'll find out later, oh, by the way, that wasn't right. He's actually your dad. I'm hoping something like that is going to happen with Rey's lineage.
Well,
to halfway explain the visions she was having in episode 7.
Right.
If not, that'll be one more thing that's just done away with from episode 7.
Oh boy.
We'll talk more about that when we get to that.
Yeah. Let's do that because that's. I don't know the way that they've built the new trilogy to where it mirrors the original trilogy. If that's the case. I'll wait. We need to wait because that's something that's a rabbit we'll chase and then it could go.
Well, and that's the thing with that original trilogy. You have 3 very different, very distinct movies, and they're almost different styles. Mm-hmm. You see a little bit of that in like the Matrix trilogy, to where you have the Matrix. And it's just the most amazing thing you've ever seen. Never seen anything like it.
Right.
And then The Matrix Reloaded it's a step from that. It's like a stepping up from that. But then the last one, Revolutions, I guess it was. Mm-hmm. It's a completely different style of film, different scenery, different because it's not much of it is not in The Matrix.
Right.
And it makes that same story progression. I know a lot of people didn't like those as well, especially the first Matrix.
Well, you could say the same thing too about the Marvel films.
Yeah,
and especially
that happens in the original Star Wars trilogy too, where you basically have a completely different film in The Last Jedi than you had in, or not The Last Jedi, Return of the Jedi.
Right. Return
of the Jedi is a completely different style of film than A New Hope was.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I mean, this in A New Hope, you have it's an origin story. You're introduced to characters, and especially in the sense of Luke Skywalker, it is his origin, and how he becomes the Jedi, and something that was said by George Lucas was that in his mind, Luke is the strongest Jedi. And this was before the latest trilogy, was that Luke was the strongest. He was the strongest Jedi ever.
Well, and I almost wish, I know that Disney's kind of doing their own thing with the new trilogy, and they've got their own ideas, and they've done away with the extended universe, and now they're just calling that Legends.
Right.
But there are some extended universe novels that would have made for an amazing sequel trilogy story.
Absolutely.
Luke becoming, even more of the Jedi Master and training Jedi. And I know you get a little bit of that story in the latest movie where it's, this is what I was trying to do. I was training Jedi and this is what happened to where it went wrong. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I would have rather have seen that movie than to see old Luke talking about it.
Right. Well, that's part of the problem was that George Lucas waited too long.
Yeah.
He waited too long. And then you have... I read several of the X-Wing novels, and a lot of those characters, one of them in particular, Corran Horn, he eventually becomes a Jedi in that extended universe. And he does a force projection, much like Luke in The Last Jedi, and it's good enough to fool Luke for at least a brief time. So those are characters that and stories that would have been interesting.
Yeah.
And it goes into building up. They're influential in building that extended universe, and those stories would have been excellent had George Lucas not waited 20 years to do a prequel.
Well, and I had always heard that he had envisioned 9 films in his head and picked out episodes 4, 5, and 6 for that trilogy because that was maybe the most interesting part of the story.
Right.
And then when he came out with the prequels, you had people that's like, well, they maybe didn't even get the point that this is a prequel. This is before Episode 4, leading up to that. Mm-hmm. Part of the problem with the prequels is that we already know the end of it. We know what's going to happen.
Right.
So that narrative in that trilogy is told from a different perspective. Whereas in the original trilogy, you basically have that main protagonist that is looking at everything through your view. He's experienced Luke leaving Tatooine and going out into the galaxy, is experiencing everything in the same way you are. So you're seeing it through his eyes. Really, in the prequel trilogy, there's not like one main character that you're seeing through. You're just on the outside looking in. Right. And I've heard that from various reviewers.
And maybe that's what made it harder to swallow. There's several things about the early trilogy, the second prequels, and it's so hard when you're trying to talk about all of it, because the early trilogy is the middle one, and right. the new, the second trilogy was the old, and there were so many things about that trilogy that just made it more difficult to swallow. The majority of the things in the second trilogy, the prequel trilogy, were computer generated. A lot of the technology for the time looked more advanced than the older stuff. When you consider, some of the Naboo fighters.
Yeah, that was one of my problems. Was how is it that this is so many years before the other trilogy, but everything looks more modern and cleaner?
Right. Yeah, that was kind of my thing about it. Was it everything looks so much better, even on Naboo. When you're talking about, you have this group of civilized people who live next to the Gungans, and some of the Gungan things look better than the Millennium Falcon.
Well, and two, part of what's going on there is leading up to that prequel trilogy, you had these special editions of the original trilogy. Mm-hmm. And what you see in these is a lot of CGI as well. Lucas constantly goes back and changes things and updates things. It's all these things that he wanted to do but didn't have the technology at the time. And you get the sense, and this is my honest assessment of it, if George Lucas had prequel trilogy technology in the late 70s, those movies would not have been as good. Right. They would have been completely on green screen as well. Mm-hmm. It would have just been everything he could think of. And look, that mind is a lot more creative than mine is probably. But he is a world builder. Yeah. And he is constantly tinkering with that original trilogy. Now he's not, because he sold it. No, yeah. But even all the way up to the late 90s, he was re-releasing it. He would go back and say, well, I really wanted to do this at the time, but I didn't have the technology. So here's my new version of it. He's constantly playing with it. And it got to the point where the special edition trilogy has
Greedo shooting first.
It has not only someone else shooting besides Han, but Han. And the reason he did that, and this was he said that Han wasn't the type of person to shoot first, or he didn't want him to be seen as the bad guy or making that decision. But he forgets completely about the fact that was part of his character progression. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. From that first movie to the last movie. Obviously, Han in Return of the Jedi wouldn't have shot first, but he had progressed from his former self.
That was
and
part
that
of
was the whole point.
That was my point before, was that he was the guy that shot first, and he didn't feel guilty about it. And then his experiences with Luke and Leia are the things that changed him.
Well, and not only did he change the fact that he didn't shoot first in the special edition, but if you watch the special edition, you will see like a little digital slide of his head, so that like when Greedo shoots, they like digitally slide his head over as if he's dodging the shot, and it looks horrible.
Oh yeah, it's bad.
And then he shoots, and none of that was in the original version. Right. And I don't know why the big debate ever came up about, well, who shot first. We know who shot first. Just go back and watch the original footage.
Right. Well, maybe he. I mean, I think it kind of goes along with what you were saying, though, is that he felt guilty about making Han this.
Yeah, that was
anti-hero.
That was his explanation of it. Is he didn't want the hero of the story to make that kind of decision. But that's the point. Is he wasn't the hero in the first movie. He became that. He had some character progression.